Good morning. Thank you, Eric, and hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to join you all here today to kick off the second ever OTT.X Summit. Before I dive in, I want to thank our attendees. Despite this unique situation we find ourselves in, the attendance looks to be record-setting this year, which I think is phenomenal for a virtual event, and I want to thank each and every one of you for supporting the organization. I'd also like to thank all of our sponsors for stepping up and supporting the event as well. I think everyone's going to be pleased at the level of opportunity engagement here for a virtual event, which is pretty phenomenal. And most important, the quality of discourse around what I think is becoming the focal point for the industry. So I encourage everyone to check out these sponsors' virtual booths and materials as you have time. I want to take this moment to recognize the staff of OTT.X who've really put together what I believe to be the premier event in the OTT space. Last year at the inaugural event, they pulled off one of the best in-person OTT events of the year, which was widely praised for its programming, the networking and business opportunities. And while I'll miss seeing everyone in person this year, I have to give hats off to Mark Fisher, Erick Hansen, and Steve Apple for outdoing themselves by bringing even more attendees, one of the best lineups I've ever seen at an OTT event. And frankly, launching a great new platform that outdoes what I think is even possible at an in-person event. Mark, you and your team have really set the standard for what's possible in virtual events here. I think everyone's going to find out over the next few days. And your hard work and perseverance have led to some phenomenal results here. While I'm an ex-Army infantryman, I have a lot of begrudging respect for the Marine slogan, adapt and overcome. And I think it's exactly what we've done here at this event. Adapt and overcome. But I also think adapt and overcome reflects the current status for most of us on this event today as we balance the seismic shifts in the industry. And on the surface, charting a path forward can seem daunting. In another way, in what seems to be a lifetime ago, I've been here before. 28 years ago, I was a young soldier going through jungle training in Fort Sherman, Panama. We were there to learn how to navigate and endure the extreme and the rapidly shifting conditions that characterize jungle warfare. Early on, I asked one of the training sergeants for a map. He basically laughed in my face and said, "Soldier, it rains so much here, the maps are obsolete before they're even printed." He was right. To me, that memory defines the moment we're facing, attempting to adapt and overcome, but without a map. Change is so rapid in our industry, so constant, our maps are useless. The well-worn trails are there, but they sometimes lead us astray or worse, off of cliffs. Landmarks that used to guide the way have been washed away. But from the beginning, the story of filmed entertainment has always been one of adapting and overcoming in the face of nearly insurmountable odds, as the brave blaze new trails without a map. In the earliest days of our industry, Hollywood was founded by startup entrepreneurs fleeing their fledgling New Jersey and New York studios due to the strict licensing and patent rules enforced by the Edison Company. Yes, my friends, many of the early founders of our industry were pirates who picked up stakes and literally moved to the opposite end of the country to avoid scrutiny. In addition to that rapid, unprecedented growth and success, those early days of Hollywood were also plagued by brutal business tactics, labor strikes, and a healthy dose of bankruptcies and shotgun marriage mergers. Those mergers did lead to stability for a while, only to be destabilized again by a major technological innovation, the arrival of talkies, that once again shifted fortunes, yet led to more mergers, consolidation, and vertical integration. Sound familiar? What it did lead to was the golden era of Hollywood. While it may seem like the studio era had a very long run, in reality, it was just a few decades before they faced antitrust lawsuits, a Supreme Court anti-monopoly ruling, and the onslaught of television, which would lead to the decline of theater going from nearly 90 million American visitors a week at its peak in 1946 to under 40 million by 1960, with the closure of more than a third of theaters, along with their forced divestiture by the studios. On the ropes, the studios had to diversify to survive, and they did. They entered a 40-year buying and building binge focused on TV production, buying and starting music labels, getting into theme parks, hospitality, consumer products. Studios themselves slimmed down dramatically and got lean through outsourcing production. Innovation was also key to survival. First came color, then cinescope, 3D, and most dramatically, a shift to a more mature content themes than could ever be allowed on television. In turn, the quest for finding and breakthrough young directors to tell these stories led to a whole new era of innovation in storytelling under the auteur era. The innovation would culminate in the rise and focus of the event picture and auteur-driven blockbusters, and the rapid rise of technology also led to home movie viewing through cable, HBO, the rise of home video, an industry that the early days of this very organization were built upon. I began my time in the industry in the next epoch of change, the transition from packaged home entertainment, DVD, and the rise of digital distribution. The DVD business went from being a $20 billion plus cash cow to now it's a vestige of its former self. And that leads us to today, where we find ourselves dealing with two major trends that will lead to changes as dramatic as we've ever seen. The re-verticalization of studios, now far bigger than their predecessors ever were, and the subsequent decline of the dominant cable television ecosystem. On the first front, we're watching in real time as the major studios under new stewardship, ownership, or management are remaking themselves into massive, modern, verticalized versions of themselves, controlling production, distribution, and direct-to-consumer exhibition, and casting aside anything that doesn't fit the model in a ruthless refocusing. But this time, the table stakes are global and in many hundreds of billions of dollars. Much like in the studio era, this new model has led to an explosion of new production and does have the potential for a new golden age of programming. But like the studio era before it, control and in turn the financial rewards are reserved for only the most elite and are often traded for the safety of sustained, steady work. For cable, we're witnessing the decline that rivals the shift from theaters to TV consumption that began 75 years ago. For recent reports, up to 55% of all consumption in the living room is now streaming and not in cable. Millennials and Gen Z audiences are consuming nearly 60% less television than they did since the shift began just 8 years ago. TV ratings are a fraction of their former selves. In the meantime, there's a fast emerging ecosystem of hundreds of free streaming, ad-supported, and paid channels that ships free with every smart TV sold annually, all 265 million of them. Consumption is skyrocketing to many tens of millions of users and doubling each year. And now some of the largest companies in the world that control the hundreds of billions in global ad sales are entering the fray. You don't have to know the history I've just laid out to know where this story leads. It's easy to forget we're living in a world defying gravity right now with dual competing models. After all, they can coexist for a long time. After the decline of the original studio system did happen over a whole decade. But speaking of the golden age, I should mention I'm a fan of classic Hollywood war movies and Westerns, especially the work of John Ford. Revisiting some of my favorites over the COVID period, one line that struck with me was spoken by John Wayne in an old RKO film, To Tie a Yellow Ribbon. In one scene, the soldiers are sitting around a campfire and a young officer laments the rapid changes affecting the US cavalry and says, "When we retire, the Army will never be the same." Wayne, in his wizened voice, says, "The Army is always the same. It's the sun and moon that change. The Army knows no season." Like the Army, our mission as people in the entertainment industry is ultimately always the same. No matter the era, no matter the technological shift or the crisis du jour, there are a few constants. We will always have people longing to be entertained. And we will always have creative folks striving to entertain them. And we will always have astute business people like all of you innovating and bridging the two. No matter what the technological shifts, mergers, divestitures, business models, or global events happen, these constants remain, and opportunity will remain. As I think about what we're trying to navigate here, I can only smile. The brief stability some of us experienced early in our careers is now gone. But as history shows, that's an opportunity to remake things and to find our place. Companies we never heard of will emerge to entertain in new ways. I think back to just a few years ago to meeting the Tubi team at their tiny office at an incubator in San Francisco for getting that first call from Pluto with a crazy idea of bringing back linear in a new way. Or hearing from Netflix that said, hey, can we license a few hundred movies for this new streaming thing we're trying out? I can guarantee you this, someone on the call today is building the next Tubi, the next HBO, the next Zumo, or maybe even the next studio. As you look into the program today, our workshops, discussions, they're all tackling the mission head on of helping you navigate the change to be a basis of stability, a basis of thought leadership and collaboration that in this rapidly changing time in the industry, we will hopefully inspire and support you as you all innovate and build. With that, I hope you all have a great show over the next 3 days. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Erick. Thank you, everyone.